Hi everyone, this is Joanna Kleinman, psychotherapist. Now here is a fact that you might not know. The average human being thinks 50,000 thoughts per day. 50,000 thoughts per day. Now if I asked you to identify a theme around most of your thoughts and what they're about, what do you think it would be? Now if you're like most humans, most of your self-talk is about yourself, and most of it is negative. And this is inner critic territory. You're thinking about where you're failing, where you're imperfect, where you're not enough, where you're being judged or upsetting others, or even where you're too successful. Now, I want to talk with all of you about you. All of us think we have some idea of who we really are. And so many women are living life with their inner critics in their ear, thinking that that's who they really are. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Who we really think we are and who we really are. See, we've developed an identity from our childhood experiences, from our parents, from our siblings, from our idea of what it means to be a girl, to be a woman, to be a wife or a mother. And we've created these ideas from our culture and from our own inner sense of who we are. But when you really think about where that inner sense of self comes from, the answer is that it is primarily from our thinking. A collection of our thoughts about ourselves. And this includes our thoughts about our relationships, about the world around us, our thoughts about memories from our past, and beliefs about ourselves and about our lives. And these are the thoughts that we relate to as truths. The fears that we have about our future, our mental labels or definitions about who we are, that's based on our conditioned and automatic habits of thought. And it's actually our habitual thinking that gets us into trouble with our sense of self. Because in case you haven't noticed, your sense of self always has a problem with something. If you stop and look, you might be able to recognize that there's probably always something that's bothering you. Now, today's problem might be different from yesterday's problem, but once today's problem is gone, there's always going to be another problem that's waiting to take its place. And this is the stream of thought that creates a lot of our sense of self. This habit of thinking, it's a habit of thinking that makes up the incessant mind chatter that speaks to us from the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep. And it's this voice in your mind that's always looking at the question, what's wrong here? What's wrong with me? Or what's wrong with them? Or what's wrong with life? That repetitive, habitual thinking is what I call your inner critic voice. And she is always waiting to try to change or fix things because she thinks that something is always broken, or something always needs fixing, or something always needs perfecting. And it's this inner critic voice that we have put, without realizing it, in the position of governing our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, and virtually our whole lives. And we're so identified with this voice, and it is predominantly an unhappy voice. So out of those 50,000 thoughts we think per day, most of those thoughts are negative. Now, life is full of ups and downs. In fact, if you really stop and think about it, half of life goes the way we want it to, and half of life doesn't. And the normal state for most of us is to be lost in the preoccupation with trying to control our world of thoughts, our world of emotions, and our world of physical sensations. And we might not even realize how overwhelming this is because we're so used to it. We've been doing it for much of our lives. Those thoughts have become as invisible as the air you breathe. And your inner critic has been giving you a list of shoulds and shouldn'ts for forever. So this shouldn't be this way, or I should be different, or he should act different, right? Your inner critic now has a litany of how things need to be in order for you to be okay. And your inner critic is the one who's constantly trying to figure life out so that you aren't inwardly feeling discontent or anxious or in some way unhappy. Now, the problem is that this way of thinking makes life very hard because without realizing it, this way of thinking keeps your inner critic in charge of your sense of self and ruling how you live your life, how you interact in your day, in your relationships, and many things in your life can become a struggle because your inner critic evaluates and judges everything that happens in your life. She judges situations from your past, right? And she says, oh, those were troubling situations. She predicts things in the future, and she says, oh, that's gonna be scary. And she basically wreaks havoc with your ability to be okay in the present moment. She causes you to spend so much energy thinking about what already happened or worrying about what will happen, and therefore she robs you from experiencing what life could be if you were free from your inner critic's habitual and repetitive thoughts. Now, I am on a mission to show as many women as I can how to break free from this compulsive habit of listening to your inner critic and thinking that she is you. Now, you might be asking, how do you do this? How do you break free from your inner critic? The way towards freedom is becoming so intimately familiar with your inner critic and everything that she says and has been saying for forever that you can begin to actually separate yourself from it. Now, this takes some effort. It takes effort to examine the thoughts that you have previously thought were you for your whole life. So the problem is that we're so over-identified and enmeshed with our inner critic that we think that what she says is totally true. So when we try to separate ourselves from what she's saying, it almost feels alien or unnatural. It's as though without our inner critic, we somehow feel lost, like we don't know who we are. And this becomes the opportunity to create something new, a new mind, a completely different mind with completely new thoughts. It opens the door to see who you are with completely different eyes. because your inner critic has been convincing you for your whole life that you're flawed or weak or somehow inadequate. Dethroning your inner critic is the opportunity to become free of these beliefs, to break the habit of giving energy and attention to the voice of your inner critic by rewiring the thoughts in your mind. Because after all, it's your inner critic that's created certain parts of your personality that are keeping you stuck and making you suffer. Your worry, your dissatisfaction, your perfectionism, your resentment, your regret, your sadness, your anger, your overwhelm. Your inner critic thinking keeps you focused on the outside world for your feelings. So she says things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm too fat, or I need to be married by this age, or I need to keep getting better and better at work, or I better get my kids to turn out the way they're supposed to. So she keeps you busy with things you have to do and places you have to go. And that leaves no time to examine your automatic thoughts and learn to think beyond your old ways of thinking. You focus instead on your problems, which perpetuates a vicious cycle of your inner critic thoughts, causing you to experience problems. And then the problems elicit more inner critic thoughts. And it goes on and on and on. To change your life, you have to learn to change the automatic thinking that created your life as it looks right now. Because your mind is like a computer program, and you have programmed it with your inner critic thoughts. So reprogramming your mind is really learning to unwire the old thinking patterns and rewire a new mind with new patterns of thought. This is how you change who you are. This is how you change the habit of feeling like no matter what your life looks like, you just aren't good enough. And I know this well because it happens to be my inner critic's theme song. I used to be completely controlled by my inner critic. I kept trying to find all of my happiness outside of myself. And I needed my life to match my ideal pictures in order to feel happy. And no matter what my life looked like on the outside, and let me tell you something, it looked pretty good. I was always feeling unsettled, like something just was missing in my life. So creating the tools for dethroning your inner critic came from my 30-year study of my own mind. And not only my own mind, but the minds of the thousands of clients that I've worked with. I taught myself how to break the habit of thought that kept me trying to be the ideal woman, the ideal wife, the ideal mother, the ideal therapist, so that I could feel good enough. Now, sure, my inner critic pushed me to a lot of the successes and a lot of the accomplishments that I have in my life. But that came at a huge cost. And now that I've mastered my mind and I've taken my inner critic out of the driver's seat of my life, I'm still reaching for my goals and I'm still creating my dreams. But I'm enjoying the journey along the way. I'm no longer focused on just getting to the goal. And for true change, it's not enough to change your thoughts. you have to also learn to change the feelings that go along with the thoughts. And I'm not talking about positive thinking here, okay? Positive thinking is not the answer because frankly, it doesn't work. You can't think positively to override how you feel from the inside. So dethroning your inner critic is a roadmap to actually becoming someone else by separating yourself from the habits of thought that up until now has made you, you. It's based on my 4-step method called the mind method that allows you to break free of the overwhelm, the discontent, the anxiety, the perfectionism, that version of you. It allows you to have conscious control over your mind. It teaches you how to manage the thoughts in your mind, which is something that unfortunately we're just not taught in our culture. When you become so intimately familiar with this voice and understand how she got in here in the first place and when and why she speaks to you, that's when you can unlearn listening to her. And you can unlearn having her rule your mind. You can begin to take guidance instead from a new mind and design a new future from that new mind. Now take a moment and think about who you would be and what you could do if you were no longer letting your inner critic rule your mind. Imagine feeling the joy and the contentment and the peace that you were meant to feel, but just haven't had access to since your inner critic took over your mind when you were young. Once you're able to fully separate yourself from your inner critic, you feel a sense of wholeness. Instead of a mind that keeps you focused on what you didn't like in your past or what you don't want in your present or future, you can design a new future by focusing on what's possible. Because the life you have now is a reflection of your thoughts. You've just been blind to those thoughts that have created your life as it looks right now. And designing a new life is about training your mind to think new thoughts and to have new beliefs that are in alignment with the life that you want. On September 16th, I'm going to have a 5-day challenge called Perfectly Imperfect. A 5-day challenge to master your mind and get out of your own way. In 5 days, I'm going to walk you through the steps of my mind method. And by the end of this challenge, you are going to be able to clearly distinguish the difference between the voice of your inner critic and who you really are. And for some of you, you've never been able to see that. You're going to be able to put your past back in your past where it belongs, and you're going to be able to design a future that's free from the constraints of your inner critic. Now, we'll have a private Facebook group. We'll have daily challenges and resources. And I'm going to be live every day at 11 a.m. Eastern Time from September 16th to September 20th. If you can't join me live, you can listen to the replay. To sign up, click the link in the description. You owe this to yourself to discover what's possible for you when you learn to dethrone your inner critic from ruling your mind.